She confessed to the robbery in front of the jury. 12 men heard the full confession and found her not guilty. The judge, furious, shouted that it was a disgrace. It wasn't. It was the pattern. These are the 17 women of the Old West who killed, robbed, and shot people, and whom the system refused to convict. Number 1. In the Old West, courts had a problem no one admitted out loud. They didn't know how to convict a woman with a revolver on her hip. Belle Starr racked up 5 cases over 2 decades: theft, receiving stolen horses, threats, and only one charge stuck: horse theft, with a sentence she served almost like a guest at the prison. The pattern kept repeating. Witnesses disappeared before trial. Jurors hesitated when faced with that figure in a velvet dress. Prosecutors dropped cases without explanation. The reason was always the same. Convicting Belle would mean admitting that a woman could be just like any outlaw in the territory, and a jury of 12 men wasn't ready for that. She died in 1889, shot in the back on a road in Indian Territory, now Oklahoma. And here's the irony. No one was ever convicted of her murder either. Number 2. Ellen Watson, known as Cattle Kate. In 1889 in Wyoming, 6 powerful ranchers dragged her from her home and hanged her from a tree, accusing her of stealing cattle. There was no trial, no judge, no evidence, just the rope. According to modern historical reviews, her real crime was something else. Ellen owned land and water rights that the big ranchers in the area wanted for themselves. And the stolen cattle? No evidence ever surfaced that they even existed. An investigation began, but the 4 witnesses in the case disappeared or died before they could testify, and the grand jury dropped the whole thing. Not one of the 6 men spent a single night in jail. Here, the driving force was fear combined with class power. When a woman threatened the interests of the powerful, the system skipped the courtroom and went straight to the gallows. This time, impunity protected her killers. Number 3. Los Angeles, 1881. Lastinia Abarta was 18 years old when she went after Chico Forster, 40 years old, heir to one of California's wealthiest families, the man who had promised to marry her and then abandoned her at a hotel. She caught up with him in the street and shot him in front of witnesses. No one disputed what she had done. The question was what 12 men would do with it. The defense argued emotional insanity. A doctor testified that any virtuous woman would have gone insane in that situation, and the crowd applauded. The jury deliberated for 20 minutes, acquitted her, and she left the courthouse to cheers from the crowd. Remember this pattern, because it will happen again. The jury wasn't just judging the defendant, it was judging the victim, and a man seen as a predator walked in already condemned. The case was widely covered by the press at the time, and what it shows is a system where the verdict depended on who the city chose to hate. Number 4. Pearl Hart. In 1899, this woman robbed the last stagecoach in Arizona, was arrested, and confessed to the crime. It seemed like an open and shut case, right? But the jury looked at her, looked at the evidence, and acquitted her. The judge was furious, scolded the jurors in front of everyone, and set up a second trial on another charge just to get her convicted. In prison, Pearl became a celebrity, with journalists lining up to see her. And then came the scandal no one wanted to investigate. She turned up pregnant inside a prison where there were only men. Instead of opening an investigation, they released her early, and the whole thing died right there. The mechanism of impunity here has a name: sympathy. The jury didn't judge the facts, it judged the person standing in front of them. And the question remains, did that jury acquit her out of compassion because of the spectacle, or out of shame over the justice system itself? Number 5. Jenny Rogers. In Denver in the late 1880s, the most powerful woman in the red light district didn't answer to politicians, she funded them. owner of the famous House of Mirrors, Jenny pulled out her revolver more than once. Records from the time mentioned shots fired at a lover and assaults that landed her at the police station. Here's the thing. None of the investigations led to a conviction, and no prosecutor ever took a case all the way through. Why? She funded campaigns, had the police on her payroll, and kept the secrets of judges, bankers, and city councilmen who visited her house. Putting Jenny on trial meant putting all of Denver on trial. In the previous cases, the jury acquitted out of sympathy. Here, it was different. Impunity was bought piece by piece. The system didn't fail. It was rented out. And where the record is vague, one fact remains. No one in that city wanted to investigate. Number 6. Fall River, Massachusetts, August 4th, 1892. Andrew Borden, one of the richest men in town, and his wife Abby were hacked to death with a hatchet inside their own home in broad daylight. Inside the house, besides the maid, there was only one other person, Lizzie, his 32-year-old daughter. She gave conflicting accounts, burned a dress days later, and even so, the jury took an hour and a half to acquit her. Why? 12 men looked at a church-going woman from a respectable family and couldn't see a murderer. The prosecution didn't have modern forensic science, and no one else was ever charged with the crime. Lizzie walked free, inherited the fortune, and lived in the same town until 1927. She was acquitted, and legally, that's what matters. But the case was never solved, and the system preferred not to imagine a respectable woman with a hatchet in her hands. Number 7. What turns a judge's daughter into the queen of the outlaws? The answer begins on a burned-out farm in Missouri. Before she was Belle Starr, she was Myra Maybelle Shirley, raised on books and piano lessons. The Civil War took everything. Her brother Bud was killed in guerrilla fighting in 1864, and the family property was reduced to ashes. The records show the turning point. The educated young woman married Jim Reed, a fugitive, and later Sam Starr, in Indian Territory, where the law barely reached. For years, accusations of theft and harboring criminals piled up around her, but almost none led to convictions. Witnesses disappeared, investigations died in desk drawers, and prosecutors gave up before facing a jury. The mechanism here was sympathy. To many Southern jurors, she wasn't a criminal, she was a reflection of what the war had done to all of them. Where the record is thin, doubt remains, but the pattern of a system that preferred not to prosecute, that is documented. Number 8. November 1864, Sand Creek, Colorado. Colonel Chivington's troops launch a surprise attack on a Cheyenne camp, flying the American flag as a sign of peace. A 24-year-old woman named Mochi sees her mother shot in the forehead inside her own tent. According to her account, the soldier then came at her, and Mochi grabbed her grandfather's rifle and killed him. She was never prosecuted for it. No charges, no trial, because putting Mochi on trial would have meant putting the Sand Creek Massacre on the record. Congress investigated, called the attack an atrocity, and even so, neither Chivington nor his men paid for any of it. Mochi became a warrior for 11 years and ended up imprisoned at Fort Marion, Florida, the only Native American woman held as a prisoner of war by the Army. No trial from the first day to the last. That's the mechanism here. Convenient silence. The system didn't acquit Mochi. It simply refused to open a case that would have condemned itself. Number 9. Charlie Parkhurst. For 30 years, California's most respected one-eyed stagecoach driver carried golden passengers along some of the most dangerous roads in the West. When a robber known as Sugarfoot tried to stop the stagecoach, Charlie shot and killed him. And no investigation was opened because killing an outlaw on the job was considered a duty, not a crime. In 1868, according to the records, Charlie even voted in a presidential election, decades before women had that right. The secret only came out in 1879 during the autopsy. The body was that of a woman, baptized Charlotte, and there were signs that she had given birth. There's the mechanism. As long as the world saw her as a man, that bullet was part of the job. In the hands of a woman, the same shot would have meant a trial, a scandal, and headlines. The record of the Sugarfoot case comes from newspapers of the time and has gaps, but the point remains the same. Frontier law didn't judge the act. It judged who seemed to have pulled the trigger. Number 10. Sally Skull. In 1800s Texas, this horse trader walked around with a whip at her waist and 2 revolvers in her holsters, and neighbors crossed the street when she passed by. She married 5 times. Here's the rundown. The first, she got rid of through divorce. The second died. The third turned up drowned in the river. The fourth simply vanished off the map. The fifth, George Horsdorf, disappeared in 1866. And she disappeared with him. Now, here's the detail that matters in this story. No sheriff opened an investigation, no jury was called, no one asked the obvious question. Why? During the Civil War, Sally led cotton caravans to Mexico. Texas needed her out on the road, not sitting in a courtroom. To be clear, nothing was ever proven against Sally, and that's exactly the point. No one even asked. In Sally Skull's Texas, widowhood was a statistic, not evidence. Number 11. Chicago, 1924. Beulah Annan shot her lover in the back inside her own apartment and, while he lay dying on the floor, spent hours listening to the same jazz record over and over. She confessed to the police. Then she changed her story 3 times and, at trial, claimed she was pregnant. The all-male jury acquitted her in less than 2 hours. Months earlier, Belva Gärtner, a cabaret singer, was found next to her boyfriend's body, with the car covered in blood. She said she was too drunk to remember. She was acquitted, too. The mechanism was sympathy. In 1920s Chicago, male juries didn't send beautiful, well-dressed women to the gallows. Newspapers called them the city's most charming murderesses. A reporter who covered both cases was so disturbed by it that she wrote a play about it. And that play became the musical Chicago. Think about that. The confession was signed on paper, and she was acquitted anyway. The system didn't fail by accident. That was exactly how it worked. Number 12. Gregoria Espinosa. Local tradition in New Mexico says that during a land dispute, armed men killed her 2 sons. And then comes the part that raises questions. The mother went out, alone, after each one of them. One by one, the men responsible started turning up dead. Everyone in the area knew who it was. And the law? Nothing. No serious investigation, no charges, no jury. The sheriff claimed he didn't have the resources. Witnesses suddenly hadn't seen anything. Blindness by choice, because the dead men were hated in the community. The mechanism here is omission. The system didn't acquit her. It simply pretended she didn't exist. She was never even indicted. It's worth saying, the records are weak. Much of the story comes from oral tradition, and the details vary from one version to another. But the pattern repeats across the entire frontier. When official justice failed, the community outsourced the job, and then forgot the contract. Number 13. Chattanooga, Tennessee, September 1899. In front of a packed crowd at the city's opera house, actress Julia Morrison pulled out a revolver right on stage and shot Frank Lydon, the lead actor in the play, whom she accused of harassing and threatening her backstage. He died right there. She was charged with first-degree murder and spent months in jail. But the public had been on her side from day one, and at her trial in January 1900, the jury found her not guilty by reason of temporary insanity. Newspapers at the time made the real reason clear. It was assumed that a Southern lady would never be convicted. The mechanism here is the jury acting like a referendum on status. They weren't judging the act, they were judging who she was. And the ending is intriguing. Days after the verdict, Julia announced a paid lecture about the case. That was when public opinion finally turned against her, not because of the shooting, but because she talked about it. The system forgave the death. It did not forgive the lady who broke the roll. Number 14. Flora Quick. In Oklahoma in the 1890s, she cut her hair, dressed like a man, and went by Tom King to steal horses, and newspapers at the time linked her name to helping with train robberies carried out by the Doolin gang. She was arrested so many times that reporters lost count, and just as many times the doors opened. Escapes that seemed way too easy, charges that never made it to a jury, investigations that died in a desk drawer. The explanation was almost a matter of simple math. Frontier jails had no women's wing, and guarding a female prisoner cost more than letting her go. The sheriff who caught her knew the judge would have nowhere to put her, and releasing her became routine, case after case. You could call it logistical impunity. No court ever acquitted her. The system simply gave up trying to prosecute her. In 1903, she disappeared from the record without ever answering for any of it. The frontier held on to women like it was trying to hold smoke. Number 15. Laura Fair, San Francisco, 1870. She shot Alexander Crittenden, a famous lawyer and her married lover, in front of his wife on a crowded ferry in the bay. The first jury sentenced her to death. The first woman sentenced to hang in California. But the state Supreme Court overturned the trial, and then came the twist. At the second trial, same facts, same evidence, opposite verdict. Acquitted, free in 1872. No one prosecuted her again. She walked out the front door and died of old age decades later. The mechanism here is laid bare. 12 men sent her to the gallows, another 12 sent her home. Same woman, same gun, same bullet. What changed was who was sitting in the jury box. If justice depended only on the facts, the two verdicts would have been the same, and they weren't. It's the most straightforward mechanism on this list, the jury lottery, and the entire case is documented in court records and newspapers from the time with no legend involved. Number 16. Mary Fields. In Cascade, Montana, in the late 19th century, a black woman nearly 6 feet tall carried a revolver and a shotgun, and used both. Records from the time mention bar fights, armed threats, and a shootout with a white co-worker who had spread rumors about her. Mary drew first. He survived, and the matter ended there. Here's the curious part. No sheriff opened an investigation, no prosecutor took the case any further, and no jury ever heard her name. Why? Because Mary was irreplaceable. Mother Amadeus, the mission superior, stood firmly behind her. The town treated her like an institution, and the U.S. mail depended on her. The first black woman in the country to carry official mail, crossing snow and dangerous roads without missing a delivery. It's fair to say that some of these stories come from oral accounts, and no death was ever proven. But the pattern is clear. When everyone needs you, the law looks the other way. Number 17. This last case doesn't have just one name. It represents dozens of others scattered throughout the records of the West. The scene kept repeating. A widow alone on her ranch, armed men showing up to take her land by force, and her deciding she wasn't going to give it up. When the dust settled, the intruders were on the ground. The trial came, and the outcome was almost never surprising. The jury was made up of farmers, men who looked at her and saw their own wife, their own land, their own fear. Short deliberation, unanimous acquittal, prosecutor closing the case without an appeal. Newspapers at the time recorded variations of this story across several territories with different names and details, but the same ending. And that ending is what ties all 17 cases together. Western juries acquitted out of sympathy, fear, class, omission, or genuine justice, never by the same standard. The system didn't fail by accident. Case by case, it chose who was allowed to kill.